Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Snack Size DFS. I am Dan Besbris, just here once again to introduce my good buddy Brenton Eckersley as he breaks down the Wednesday, January the 8th, 2025 card. The great Giannis versus Wemby showdown is on the docket for Wednesday, among other fun games, of course. That's kind of the nightcap, believe it or not. That's the late game, and it's not on all that late. So kind of an early slate on Wednesday. Should be a lot of fun. 8 games, and Brenton's looking to get you guys some winners once again. Please take a moment to subscribe because we're going to have this DFS content coming at you as often as possible. It's an amazing new addition to our channel and one that's really going to help lift you guys up and over the hurdle as you look to conquer the daily fantasy landscape. And before I turn it over to Brenton, a reminder that BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in the year 2025. They've got the largest selection of odds on everything from football to the NBA, college basketball, NHL, and UFC. And thusly, BetOnline is the number one sports betting source for this new year. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. From touchdowns to three-pointers and hat-tricks, BetOnline has you covered on every game, every play, and every win. Bet online, the game starts here.
Thanks as always, Mr. Besbris. Welcome to another episode of Snack Size DFS. I'm your host, Brenton Eckersley, coming to you from Adelaide in South Australia. If you are new here, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Snack Size DFS is basically a condensed look at the DraftKings slates. We are not here every single day, but we have basically put together a video/podcast series that condenses the slate down as much as we can, usually running around the 15-minute mark because, you know, kids, life, work, all that stuff. Not everybody has a million hours to listen to podcasts, so I've basically done all the work for you guys. As soon as the prices come up for the DK slate the following day, I go through, click on every single player, well, not all of them, but most of them, and just have a look at what's going on with the news, the questionables, the probables, the doubtfuls, and the outs. And yeah, I basically do that research for you and bring you a nice condensed version of a DFS card for DraftKings pricing. And as you'll see here, we start with game notes. This is the Wednesday, January the 8th DK card. We have 8 games on and they are all in the main slate. So let's jump in. First page here, game notes. We like to just highlight a couple of games that are going to be fairly quick, i.e. more possessions, more scoring, more stats. So these are games that you can target and hopefully put yourself over the edge in your DFS games. The slow games, obviously the complete opposite. So less possessions, less scoring, potentially tougher defense and games to avoid. So on the far side of things, we've got Chicago at Indiana. That's a 243 game total. That's pretty quick. Milwaukee at Toronto, no game total yet, but I expect that one to be fairly fast. Toronto play very quickly this year, so Milwaukee will get a nice little pace bump. And then Portland at the Pelicans. That is, we don't have a game total yet either, but that one will be very quick as well. Both of these teams play very fast. The slow game of the day, just one to avoid if you're making toss-up decisions between two different players at same pricing, etc. Detroit at Brooklyn, that's a 216 game total. Pretty slow, one to avoid where you need to. Attack and Stack is a page we look at teams that just leak fantasy points everywhere, and this is an ever-changing landscape, but generally the top 5 or 6 teams remain the same, the teams that give up the most fantasy points. So Washington, Chicago, Toronto, the Pelicans, and the Blazers all give up plenty of fantasy points. So you can look at Philly versus Washington, Indiana versus Chicago, New York versus Toronto, Portland versus the Pelicans, and back the other way, Pelicans versus the Blazers. First game of the day, game 1, OKC at Cleveland. We have some news here, a little highlight there in white text that I've decided to include here on each team. Caruso's out. AJ Mitchell's also out. They're the lower minute guys, but we do have some options there with those guys out. Not much on the Thunder to report here, other than I like Isaiah Hartenstein at 7,100. That's a price drop, and he is a really good cash play. You can also have a look at teams playing the Cavs and the center position, giving up lots of fantasy points there at the moment. Cason Wallace 3,700, Aaron Wiggins 3,200. These are plays because Caruso and AJ Mitchell have already been ruled out. Which one's going to go off? Yeah, it's a bit of a tough one to work out. Probably wait to see who's starting. Aaron Wiggins doesn't normally start. If Cason Wallace gets the start, you can drop him in at 3,700 if you need that low price player. For the Cavs, Isaac Okoro's come up as questionable, and he did practice, which will basically probably can Dean Wade's upside if there is much there. Not much interest here either. OKC are a tough team to play against, so Darius Garland at 7,300, he's beat that price pretty comfortably the last 6 out of 7 games, so we like that. Evan Mobley at 7,900, look, I don't have much interest in that, but he does have 50 DK point upside any given night. He's got to play OKC. It's not the best play, maybe a cash game look there. And just a little pinata play, as I like to call them, that is referencing putting on a blindfold, entering a dark room, closing the door, swinging a toothpick at a pinata and hoping that it comes off. Ty Jerome, 3,400. He had 25 DK points. He has 25 DK points around about in his 20 plus minute games, and he has got a few of those lately. It's really just a dart throw. Chicago at Indiana, this one's going to be a pretty quick game. DeSumo is still out, so we love Zach LaVine at 8,100. He's coming off some big games, 63, 51. He's playing the Pacers. You can absolutely attack the Pacers at the guards positions, which also brings into play Kobe White, 6,700. That's a price drop, and he's also had 17 and 18 shot attempts in the last few games, which is the kind of thing we want to see, right? He may not hit them all in the previous games, but when someone's putting up that many shot attempts, then there is a chance there for them to score big DK points. Josh Giddey had a pretty ordinary game last time out, which was disappointing, but 7,100, he's in play. That's a $600 price drop. He had 31 minutes and only shot 3 of 12, which is a Josh Giddey thing to do, right? But there again, he's put up 12 field goal attempts. He gets enough peripheral stats to make 7,100 a good play if he can hit some shots. On the Pacers side of the ball, it's only Aaron Naismith who's still doubtful. We don't expect him to play probably. He's been out for a long time. My interest here lies in Benedict Mathurin at 5,800. He's had 30 plus minutes and also 10 to 18 field goal attempts in the last 4. That makes him a decent play. Tyrese Halliburton's actually come up as questionable before I recorded this morning. If he plays 8,500, that's a pretty good price for Halliburton versus the Bulls, who give up fantasy points everywhere. He was also in a home game, and we have recognised the shooting splits lately. Home games, he seems to be much better. If Halliburton can't go, then Andrew Nembhard at 4,900, TJ McConnell at 3,800 are your plays. Obi Toppin at 3,700. This is a guy I don't play very often. I just don't seem to get him right. He's just one of those guys. 36 DK points last time versus Chicago, though, so that is a fair play there, Obi Toppin. Washington at Philly, this should be a fairly quick game, I would have thought. You can actually attack both of these teams pretty heavily, but we especially like Philly here versus Washington. And also we have major outs on the Philly side of the ball. But let's do Washington first. The Wizards are on a back-to-back. Brogdon, he's not playing Tuesday. Coming into Wednesday, who knows if he plays. Bilal is in Tuesday. Does he play the back-to-back? That's another thing we need to keep an eye on. Paul is out on Tuesday as well. Does he come back in for the Wednesday game? We really need to watch the news there. If Brogdon plays, 6,400, that's a pretty good price. If Jordan Poole doesn't play, Kyle Kuzma, 6,200. I like that price with both Poole and Brogdon, their status both up in the air. Love that play if neither of those guys come in, because someone has to shoot the ball. So that's a good play if Poole and Brogdon are out. Alex Sarr at 6,100. He's coming off DK points returns of 34, 34 and 38. Embiid is out on the other side of the ball. This is a pretty good play. Alex Sarr at 6,100. Maybe doesn't have the hugest upside, but you can still definitely look at him. And just another little pinata throw there, or pinata play. Jared Butler's been getting some minutes off the bench for the Wizards lately. We need to keep an eye on Pull on Brogdon, and also Bub Carrington was questionable before the game on Tuesday. He actually got ruled in, but if we have two or more of those guys out, Jared Butler becomes a nice little dart throw at 3K. Okay, on the Philly side of the ball, plenty going on here. Drummond is questionable and missed practice, which is never a good sign. We already know that Joel Embiid and Paul George are out, so that just opens things up wildly for the other 76ers players. I love Tyrese Maxey here at 8,900 with those guys out. All the usage is going to run through Tyrese, so 8,900 versus the terrible Wizards team. That's an awesome play tonight. Kelly Oubre will get a usage bump with these guys out, 5,100. Gershon Yabusele, 5K. That's if Drummond sits. It's very difficult to work out which one of those guys is going to go off. It's been Yabusele lately. If Drummond plays, I'll have less interest in Gershon though. And also Caleb Martin at a cheaper price of 4,900 is going to be well and truly in play. He's been getting 30 plus minutes anyway, but that usage is now going to have to spread elsewhere. Someone's got to shoot the ball. Can Caleb put up 20 points? Sure he can. So 4,900 is not a bad play there. Down the bottom there, Andre Drummond, as I mentioned, questionable. 5,100 is a good price for him if he plays with Embiid out. And just your little pinata play there is Ricky Council, 3K. The minutes haven't been great lately, but if anyone's going to come off the bench and put up some points for the Sixers in this injury situation, Ricky Council might be your guy. Detroit at Brooklyn. This is a slow one. I don't have a whole lot of great interest in the Detroit guys here. Brooklyn are a super slow-paced team. Detroit are themselves, but Brooklyn particularly so. We do know that we've lost Jaden Ivey basically for the season, so Malik Beasley at 5,700. The minutes have been there anyway, but now the floor is really safe. He had a pretty bad shooting game in the last one, 1 from 10. So 5,700 is a good spot for a bounce back here. Tobias Harris finally found his shot. Small forwards on the Nets is a good place. Versus the Nets, the small forward position is a pretty good place to target, and I don't mind Harris here at 6K. And Tim Hardaway Jr., this is another guy I just never get right. I play him and he scores 12. I don't play him and he hits 12 shots, so it's very difficult to work him out. 4K, he's a yo-yo, but we do know that Asar Thompson is out and he's had 30 minutes in his last 4 games, so if, again, Hardaway hits some shots, that 4K becomes a breeze. On the Brooklyn side of the ball, we've got Ben Simmons questionable. We know that D'Angelo Russell is already ruled out, and we know that Cam Johnson is out as well. That brings into play Ben Simmons, the second one there, just with D'Angelo Russell out. Simmons is questionable himself, but a 6K, that's a nice cash play. Keon Johnson at 5,800. I would love this if Simmons sits as well, but he is still in play with just Russell out. Zaire Williams back in the team at the moment. 5K, he's had a couple of 30-point DK games in his last 2, so call him a cash play. He doesn't have a whole lot of upside. And another decent cash play if we see that Simmons is out as well. Tyrese Martin will come off and get some extra minutes. He's had 29 and 30 minutes in the last 2. He's probably got fairly low upside, but 4,600. I'd probably rather play Zaire Williams, to be honest. Toronto at New York, this is going to be probably a fairly slow game. New York tend to pace down, but Toronto pace up. So if anyone's going to get a bump here, it's the Knicks. Not too much interest on the high price guys for Toronto, but I do like Emmanuel quickly. Anytime he's around this price, 6,800, that's a price drop, and he's had some horrid shooting games in the last couple. So we can expect him to bounce back from 3 from 10 and 4 from 17 field goal attempts at some point. Hopefully it's in this game. Another little dart throw, pinata play, Jamal Shed. Look, don't get too excited about this. The dude really only gets minutes when there's a blowout at the moment or when other guys are injured. There's no real injuries on the Raptors. So if you think that New York will just run away with this game, which is highly possible, then 3,300 for Jamal Shed, hoping that he gets some fourth quarter minutes. Yeah, it's not a bad option. On the New York side of things, we know that Karl Anthony Towns and McBride are both questionable. Cat out if he sits. Look, I honestly thought it would just be Precious Achiuwa all the way when this happened in the last game, but it was Sims who got the minutes. 3,800 for Sims. Look, who knows what Tibbs is going to do. I prefer to play Achiuwa. I don't trust Tibbs to play Sims again that many minutes, so I don't know. let's see who starts. Hey, if we get the news early, then we can probably slot that particular player in. With Cat questionable, Josh Hart gets a bump on rebound, so 7,900 is not a bad play. He is kind of limited on upside there, though, so maybe a cash play. Cat himself, if he comes in and we hear that there's no minutes restriction, 10,100 is an excellent price for Karl Anthony Towns versus the Raptors. So just keep an eye on the news there. And of course, if Cat doesn't play, then Jalen Brunson gets the usage bump, 9,100. He is having a rough shooting time at the moment. If Cat sits, I expect him to bounce back from a poor shooting night as well. This is probably the fastest game of the day once we get a game total. Portland at my Pelicans. If you didn't know, I'm a Pelicans fan. It's a pretty tough season, but we just keep on. Zion's back today, which is awesome. This should be a very fast game. We already know that Jeremy Grant is out for the Blazers. That brings into play Denny Avdia, 48, 40, and 25 in his last game. That we can basically count out that 25 versus Detroit. I believe the upside for 40 and 48 is there every time that Jeremy Grant doesn't suit up. Anthony Simons, 6,500, finally rolling. This is what we expect from Anthony Simons all season, and especially with Grant out. 38, 44, 54 DK points in his last three. 6,500 versus the Pelicans is a breeze. DeAndre Ayton, 6,200. This is basically his floor. He is playing the Pels. There are fantasy points everywhere to be had. So 6,200 for Ayton is a good price. And then Grant out again. So Shaden Sharp is also in play at 5,700. Pinata play for these guys, your low price swing for the fence play. Chris Murray, he got a decent amount of minutes in the last game and put up some decent fantasy points if you need to land at that 3,300 spot. Whoops, I missed one there. Let's go back. Pelicans, my Pelicans. Maybe I did that deliberately because watching the Pelicans as a fan right now is pretty bloody hard. Pelicans also on a back-to-back. We know that Zion's back in. Woohoo! For the Pelicans on Tuesday. Does he play in the back-to-back? I would highly doubt it. If he does, then the Pels need to have a good look at their injury management, and they probably need to do that anyway. We know that Trey Murphy is already out on Tuesday, so that makes him questionable for Wednesday. Look, we need all the wins we can get, so it's possible that Trey Murphy suits up. We've also had DeJounte questionable on the Tuesday game, so whether he plays the back-to-back, we need to watch that. CJ McCollum at 8K, that's a great play. If DeJounte Murray sits, usage has to go elsewhere. DeJounte himself at 8,800, this is a great spot versus the Portland guards. They'll find it very difficult to stop that DeJounte Murray. So if he plays, we know there's no minutes restriction. That's a good play. Herb Jones at 5,300. This is just a little bit of insight because I follow the Pelicans so closely. With Zion back, if Zion plays, then Herb will just sit in the corner and Zion will kick it out to him multiple times because that's what Zion does, and that's why we have shooters around Zion. So we also know that Trey Murphy's out, so Herb Jones not a bad little dash here at 5,300. And then if DeJounte sits, we need to look at Jose Alvarado at 4K. He'll probably start, and Brandon Boston Jr. off the bench as a pure scorer at 3,400. Lakers at Denver, I have very little interest in this game. Just throwing a few names in here so that somebody's up on the board. James Harden at 8,600. Nuggets guards are not the best defensive unit in the NBA, so that's an okay price. He could have 50 on his night. Norm Powell, 6,700. We know that Kawhi is back. It's probably more of a cash play. I think his upside's going to be fairly limited as Kawhi continues to climb in minutes. On the Denver side of the ball, this is a back-to-back. Nikola Jokic came up as questionable for Tuesday just before I hit record here, so that's interesting. He'll probably play, he usually does, but at 12.7, look, it's a price jump. He's starting to get very expensive now. His last two games, 80 plus DK points. Interesting. I don't know here. You can never count Nikola out. 12.7 though is starting to get pretty high. Michael Porter Jr. though at 6,300, he's always just a solid cash play. Moving on to San Antonio facing the Bucks in Milwaukee. We know that Jeremy Sohan's out. Wemby at 11.5. This is a price jump for Wemby, but 55 DK points is the floor at the moment. I love this kind of marquee matchup here with Wemby versus Giannis. I think they'll both be going as hard as possible. So 11.5, I will pay that for Wemby. Chris Paul at 6,100. That's too cheap for Chris Paul. He's exceeded that price 7 out of his last 10 games, so no problems there. Keldon Johnson with Sohan out. Cash play, 4,200, kind of limited. And your dart throw is Harrison Barnes at 3,800. There's another dude I can never get right. I just can't get Harrison Barnes right ever, so I rarely play him. On the Bucks side of things, we know that Middleton and Giannis are both probably going to play. Giannis at 11-4. Again, I love this Showtime kind of matchup between the two big names, Wemby and Giannis. So if you're not playing Wemby, you could look at Giannis for $100 cheaper. Brook Lopez has been absolutely rolling lately, finally. Some good minutes, 5,300. And also, even though they have Wemby, the center position on the Spurs is actually one of the easiest places to score fantasy points at the moment, surprisingly. So just keep an eye on that. 5,300 is a good price for Lopez. Bobby Porter, 7K. I'd much rather play him when Giannis is out, of course, but he has a decent floor, so it may be a cash play there. That's our 8 games. So here's the question of the day for you guys. Who is the one guy you never seem to get right? I've mentioned a few today. Harrison Barnes. I can also think Kevin Huerter, Gary Trent Jr. Can you see the trend here? It's shooting guards at a lower price. It's the guys who you're never sure which minutes are going to come their way. Never get them right. Who do you have as a guy that you can never get right? Drop it in the comments down below, and I'd love to see who you guys struggle with. My favourite plays of the day, Hartenstein versus Cleveland, Garland versus OKC going back the other way. Levine versus the Pacers in a great spot. If Halliburton's out, we've got Nembhard and we've got McConnell. Pick a 76er versus Washington. Honestly, all of these guys are in play. Karl Anthony Towns, if he plays versus Toronto. Brunson versus Toronto if Cat doesn't play. Maybe even if he does play. Anthony Simons versus my Pelicans. And the Wemby versus Giannis matchup. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe the video. Please share it on socials. We want to build this following up as much as we can. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. And of course, that guy you can never get right, let me know who that is. You can find me at Terrain72 on X/Twitter and at Terrain72.bsky.social on Blue Sky. That's it for today, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Appreciate you guys being here. Back to you, Daniel.
Thanks, Brenton. Another amazing episode of Snack Size DFS here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. A quick reminder here as we head out, please do hit that subscribe button. That's a big deal. It's how we continue to grow and how we continue to bring you more and more cool stuff. Follow Brenton on Twitter. He already told you, but it's Terrain72, Terrain 72 on social media. Like the video. That's an easy one. The button's right there. It should be super simple. And please take a second to like our trade deadline live show video that's in the show description and featured on our YouTube page as well. We'll be back with more full season fantasy coverage in the not too distant future. For now, set those DFS lineups, have some fun, and make sure to get updates throughout the day from Brenton. I'm Dan for Old Man Squad. We'll see you soon.